Hey guys, welcome to the Whimsical Workshop. We are still celebrating Christmas in July this month. So for the video this week, I'm going to show you how to make our I Love Sn'Gnomies quilt using the free pattern from Henry Glass. I will put the link below for the free pattern and the fabrics for you. But we do have some really exciting news, so let's get started. In this video, to continue with our Christmas in July, I'm going to be sharing with you how to put together our free pattern I Love Sn'Gnomies from Henry Glass Fabrics. We were asked to design a quilt using the fabric, and this is what I came up with. It's beautiful flannel fabrics. And when I asked them to send me some fabric to make the sample for this video, they sent me 3-yard cuts, which means I have enough extra fabric to give you guys a kit. So one lucky viewer is going to win this kit. I am going to ask that it be in the US only due to shipping is so expensive, so I apologize. But if you are in the US and you want to win this kit, make sure you go below the video on YouTube and get the link. Or you can follow me on all our social media. I will be posting how to win this over there as well. You can find us on Instagram at Whimsical Workshop, Facebook at Heidi Pridemore Whimsical Workshop, or you could just go to our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and all the links are at the top of the homepage. So without further ado, let's get started making the quilt. So to cut the panel for our I Love Sn'Gnomies panel project, the first thing you want to do is you want to take the panel, lay it out flat, get a tape measure, and make sure that the measurement here and what it looks like in the quilt are all going to mesh. So here we've got it. You're going to see here's the whole panel, and we're going to trim it so you get this little short part and get rid of this part. And then we have it going this way. So we're saying to cut it 21.5 wide by 30.5 long. So let's see what we get with 30.5 long. The reason you do this is when we design a quilt with the panels, we don't get the panels, actual panels, till 6 months later. So we're going off of the artwork measurement and the way it's printed and how it's rolled on the bow. All these things can affect the panel. It can get stretched, the artwork can shrink. It's a lot of different things that happen between the time we design this and this actually getting printed. So it's always safe to measure first and then trim as needed. And then on all of our panels, we always put a floating border next to the panel. We have this border a little bit larger so you can trim it to size. We call it our security blanket because that way, if this comes in smaller, I can still cut it like this and I still have excess in this border to pick up the slack, so to speak. So let's see, on this one, I believe I've already checked this. So 30.5, we would go 1/4 inch above and below the stripe. So we're going to go ahead and cut that. Get rid of as much bulk as we can so it's easier to cut in between, cut the next. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And I do have to say, this flannel is so soft. It's super cuddly. Now, I live in Arizona. I'm in Phoenix, outside of Phoenix, Chandler. And it is 100 degrees outside. So a flannel quilt is not ideal at the moment. But if I wanted some warmth in the winter, this is definitely a nice flannel to use. All right, so we're going to go ahead and cut this and this. Now, isn't this just the sweetest the panel ever? I don't know. It kind of reminds me of my mom and dad. If I pictured them as gnomes, that's what they'd look like. All right, so to do the width, it is 21.5. And that is inside. So this is 21 3/4 from white line to white line. So it's 1/8 of an inch in on each line. I sometimes find that easier to find something smaller to trim to. So I will do that on this side. I will cut it 1/8 of an inch inside the white line. And flannel, you need to straighten it all the way up. It does like to move and stretch on you. There's that. And then again, I'm going to just slide this down and keep my cutting going. Okay, so now I know that side is where I want it. To trim the other side to make sure this is 21 and a half. I'm just going to take my acrylic ruler, this is my 24-inch ruler, and I'm going to align the 21 and a half on this edge, and I'm going to use this edge to cut. So I'm only cutting 8.5 inches at a time. I just slide the ruler up, slide, cut. At some point my arms are shorter than my table, so I need to pull it towards me. Oops. All right, so there is the panel. Scoot this guy up here, all cut for you. And how sweet is that? I'll get the borders sewn on and I'll show you how I trim it up to size. But there he is, there they are. Aren't they the sweetest? This is from Shelly Kaminsky. I always say her last name wrong, I'm sure. If I ever meet her in person, she'll be like, you did all those quilts in your videos and you never learned my name. And I apologize because I'm horrible at pronouncing names. All right, so I'm gonna keep cutting. I'll be back when I get the borders on that one and show you what it looks like. So here is the panel with the border. So you may be wondering what all these squares are. I've already cut everything for the quilt here. And I thought while I was cutting fabric, I would cut 8-inch squares from all of the prints in the group and just sew a big patchwork quilt together. So let's just look at these because they're so pretty and so soft. So we've got blue swirls, and we've got cream snowflakes. This one's my favorite. Look at how sweet that polar bear is with his little scarf and his hat. And the penguins. Another swirl in cream. Blue snowflakes. Then we've got these sweet gnomes making gnome angels in the snow in cream. I think there's another one in a different color, but we'll get to that. Then we've got her happy, happy snowmen. Snowflakes in cream. And again, these are all these super soft flannels. So this is the blue swirl again. I just put these in order of how I'm going to sew them. These guys, these are warm and cozy, hello winter. Yeah, these are super cute. These are the gnomes with the coffee mugs. More snowflakes. Now we've got gnomes skiing. This guy, he's so cute with his little scarf all wrapped around him. So this collection will be coming out soon. This is from Henry Glass. It's called I Love Sn'Gnomies. Hello Winter. This is the same coffee one in brown versus cream. I think I like the brown, but I'm a very high contrast kind of girl. Then they have the medallion snowflakes. This would be fun just as a border, but again, these are cut in blocks. Now the gnomes are not only, this is the same one as before, but they're also ice skating. I kind of missed that last time. Another swirls and another polar bear. So this, I'm just gonna sew these squares together and make a big, just patchworky quilt. I'm just doing blue, cream, blue, cream. Now back to our quilt in the video. So what we need to do now is take our panel, which I have done, and sew your first border on it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about sewing with flannel because there's some little tricks for flannel that are helpful. But right now what we need to do is take this and trim it down to 32.5 by 39.5. So how I do that is I measure what I'm at, and I always measure along a seam. And I measure along a seam versus the edge because the edge can wave, it can stretch. So I find this easier. So this measures 40.5. And we need to go to 39.5. So I literally just need to trim 1/2 inch off top and bottom. And then let's see about this way. This needs to be 32.5. And it's 33. So 1/2 inch from top and bottom, 1/4 inch from side to side, and this will be spot on the right size. And you always want to do that to make sure that usually when we do a panel quilt like this, we do the cheater border, and then the next thing is a piece border. And if you want your piece border to match, you need this piece to be the correct measurement. So instead of trying to deal with all of that, we know we need to take 1/2 inch top and bottom. So I'm just going to take my ruler and lay it on here and trim away a 1/2 inch. All right, so this video is supposed to be about working with flannel and sewing flannel and cutting flannel. So let's talk a little bit about that, you know, because it is the subject. So when I get a flannel line across my desk and I need to design a project for it, the biggest things I need to think about is not giving you a bunch of tiny pieces you have to cut. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean you can't sew 1-inch squares together out of flannel, but what it means is that your seams will get bulky if they're overlapping too much. So that's number one, is you want to have, when you work with flannel, you want to have a little bit larger pieces than you do with cotton. Number two, you do not want to have a lot of seams intersecting each other. You know, like diamonds that kind of meet in the center. That will be a bulky seam nightmare. So really think about the design to make sure the end user doesn't struggle with that. But if you're going to work with flannel on your own, say you found a cotton pattern and you're like, oh, I'm going to make this out of flannel. Think about that. Don't pick a complex pattern or a very piecey pattern that has a lot of intersecting seams, because you are going to be fighting against the flannel the whole time. So that's tip number one for sewing with flannel. Tip number two for sewing with flannel is easy one. Make sure you use a walking foot, or if you have, I am sewing on a Bernina 570 QE. That has dual feed feature on it. So if you're lucky enough to have a machine with dual feed feature, make sure the dual feed's on. This is bulkier. You really want to have the walking foot or dual feed to help push this thick flannel through the quilt. That is going to make sewing this really easy. So that is tip number two, and I'm just about done trimming here. So we'll come back to the tips as I explain the next step. All right, so here is my center panel. We're going to turn it sideways here because of my cutting table. So I'll just pull it down here so you can see how pretty it is. I just loved this bias plaid print, and it really frames these guys before we get to the busy border. So let's look at the design a little bit. So you'll see here, I showcased the panel in the center. This can be busy on its own, so I just used it as a different texture to break up the big novelty prints and the panel. Then we got, which is coming next, this is Henry Glass's basic fluffy flannel, fluffy flannel, and I'm going to do that to stop the movement of the plaid print by giving your eyes a place to rest. Then we go to the snowman. There's a snowman and these little cream guys. So what I did, because it was flannel and there were a lot of busy novelty prints, is I made the center quiet by adding these borders. Usually you would see the piecing on the inside and the borders on the outside. So to keep this from being too busy, I did the borders on the inside and did the piecing as the very last edge of the quilt, so that it separated this movement from the showcase. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of the thought process behind this. Now, because it was flannel, and again, this is also a really fun kids quilt, so to speak, though this is my quilt, so not too kidsy. I wanted to keep the piecing very, very simplistic, so we kept everything as rectangles and squares. We also have a lot of beginner quilters who are just coming on board, and if you are new to the channel, just a quick hello to you. Make sure you leave me a comment below and let me know you're a beginner. But because of that, we're also looking at developing some patterns that are more beginner friendly instead of some of the complex ones that we can do. So all of that went into that design. So it looks very simple, but I did give it a lot of thought. So now that I have this center done and trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and add all of these borders till we get out to the piecing. And I'll be back to show you the last piecing and give you my last few tips on working with flannel. Okay, so I went ahead and I put the first border on after the plaid. I put on the brown, and I realized that another tip I can share with you is how to put on a border. This border has cornerstones. So this is the quick and dirty way of how I do that. You obviously can cut them to size that we list in the pattern, but I do recommend not cutting your borders to length on any quilt project until you sew it and can measure it. And I use the borders to measure in place. So what I mean by that, I start at one end and I pin the border on at this end. Anytime you're working with borders, cotton or flannel, you always want to pin them on before sewing. That's just a general tip in general. A general tip in general. That makes sense, Heidi. That is just a general tip for quilting. But you see here, I'm just going along and I'm matching up the two pieces and I'm pinning them in place. So that is how I would do it. And then when I get to the end, I trim the panel. I cannot talk tonight. I trim the border to the size of the quilt. That way I know my borders are always the right size for my quilt. So let me finish this. And then before I sew this on, this is how I deal with cornerstones. I'm just going to flip this back for the minute. What I do is I go ahead and I measure and pin the top and bottom borders on. I know you're going, oh my God, you didn't put your side borders on. It's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this. I don't have to pin it actually. I just need to lay it on here. And I'm going to measure this out to the quilt top, fold this back, and cut. Now I know my top border is exactly the same size as the quilt center with a seam allowance. So now I can just take this over. We got too many fabrics here. I can just take this over and sew these guys on. And they're going to be exact because I measured this to this. And I did it before we put the side borders on because then you're trying to guess. This way I can be exact. So this one is ready to sew. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. And then I'll go back and pin the side borders on the way I was starting to show you how to do it. This is a super, super easy shortcut way to do this. I do it a lot when we're in a hurry and trying to get a quilt out the door for a client. But you have to remember to cut these before you sew the side borders on to use this method. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So that's another tip, but it doesn't have to do with just flannel. It's just a tip in general. All right. So this one is ready as well. With these. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pin my sides on and I will sew these on and then I'll come back and show you the top and bottoms once I get these on. Does that make sense? Got all that? So I'm going to sew these on, come back and put the top and bottom borders on. So I have the side borders on, and now I have my top and bottom borders with their cornerstones sewn on. So let's see if my trick worked. We're going to put this on, and how I do these is I match up the cornerstone seam with the inner border. Which reminds me of another good tip for you guys. Anytime you're dealing with these cornerstones, press all of your pieces towards the border. So I put the side borders on and I pressed it towards the border. I put the cornerstones on and I press it towards the border. By always pressing towards the same part, these seams will now nest. So to align my top border, I align that seam first and I pin right next to it. And then I come down here and align this seam second and I pin that there. Then I just gently tug to see that it all lines up, and it does. We're good. So then I just drop in a few pins. Then I just drop in a few pins to hold this in place. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom border, and then there's one more just regular border of plaid that I'm going to add on, and then we'll be ready to put the last piece border on. Alright, so we have all the solid borders on the quilt. The last border on this quilt is made up out of squares. So how we do this is we need to piece these together, and I like to lay them out by like prints, and I think I cut extra, I'm not sure. I just sort of was cutting whatever I could get out of the strips. And then we tell you the letter order in the pattern for the top and bottom and the side borders, and then we give you a full layout on how to do it. I just tend to look at the picture. It makes it a little easier and goes faster. And none of the borders are the same. So the left side and right side are different. Yes, they are. So I put one block down. The next we're doing the left side here. And I do it this way so that when I go over to the sewing machine and I pick them up in order, and it's, again, this is a scrappy border. You don't have to be this exact with it. You could just go over and go do 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 do, and I say I need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 blocks. And I'm just checking here. So it does repeat all the way around. So if I were to take a marker here, that's a repeat. You could just pick them up and sew them in that order, but we're going to do it this way. This makes it just as easy. So another thing, if you don't already, you need to have a 1/4 inch foot on your machine. It helps immensely with these flannels. They also don't have a lot of stretch, so you want to make sure you're cutting it accurately. And circling back around after I've said, do not do things that are super piecey with lots of seams in the blocks. If you decide to not listen and want to do that, then what I would recommend is to press your seams open. It does make your seams a little bit weaker, but it will make them less bulky, and it'll definitely make sewing this much, much easier. So these are all my left side squares. And I'm just going to repeat and do it for all 4 sides. I'm going to sew them on, and our quilt will be done. So I hope these tips in working with flannel and just in general making a very simple quilt helps you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. If you've enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up, because when you do that, that definitely helps me. And I would love to keep making videos for you guys. I just would like to know what you'd like to see in a video. So I'm going to get this sewn up, and I will be back to show you the final. Alright, so it appears I lost the last bit of footage for this video, so I'm going to share this image of the quilt with you. It is a super fun, super easy quilt. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure you check out the link below on a way to enter to win a fabric kit for this one. We are going to draw the winners for this one on Friday the 23rd, so make sure you follow the links and get yourself entered for that. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell, and give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed the video. See you next time.